speaker I am absolutely delighted to have here is Ciara Geraghty. So Ciara is a best-selling Irish novelist. She lives in Dublin and is the proud owner of one husband, two technically grown-up children, a teenager and a handsome but unstable dog called Gary. When she's not writing in her garret, Ciara loves reading, swimming in the sea and playing her violin. And she also co-hosts the podcast Bookbirds. And I'm so delighted to have Ciara here. I absolutely love her style of writing. She's so funny. She's going to talk to us today and then do a reading from her book as well.
Thank you so much, Louise, for that lovely introduction. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm very old school, but I have to say I am delighted to be here, and it's a great honour and a privilege for me to have been invited to speak here today. And it's so great to see so many of you here. But I do want to preface absolutely everything I say by saying that I am not a menopause expert. But please don't worry, because we have loads of these. Yeah. We have doctors and we have a physiotherapist, we have a psychologist, we have a dietitian, there are specialists here. I am merely a menopausal woman. I'm a menopausal woman writer, and I happen to have written a book featuring a menopausal woman writer. That's pretty much the extent of my expertise. I imagine that you're all here to become better informed, and you're like this, plague of locusts, and these are a beautifully ripened field of wheat. And I do applaud you for that, because I'm a great believer in sticking my head in the sand and hoping it'll all just go away by itself. This has actually never worked for me, but I am quite a slow learner. When it came to menopause, though, there was nothing for me to learn because it was never discussed. It wasn't discussed in school, it wasn't discussed at home. Even Yvonne Clarke, that girl that we all have in our lives that tell us about it, for everything from Santa to sex to sedition, she never mentioned it. And I was one of the lucky ones, because I had some brand of sex education. When I was 12, my mother ushered my father and my siblings out of the house and told them to absent themselves for at least 6 minutes, because I remember that's how long the talk lasted. I spent most of it writhing in embarrassment. I was very immature for a 12-year-old. I remember doing my best not to laugh when my mother used words that she had never used before, like vagina and penis and erection. And you may need to put your fingers in your ears for this one: moist. And really, she's never used those words since that day either, Like many Irish families in those days, we were not brilliant at talking about personal stuff, and we were really uncomfortable talking about sex. Even now, when a sex scene comes on the telly and my mother's in my house or I'm in her house, I'll still feel this huge need to create a diversion, say something like, "Oh, did you hear about Theresa Mulcahy?" And then I'll go and I'll invent this complicated, entirely fictitious story about poor old Theresa Mulcahy, and that story will be doing the rounds at the Bridge Club the following night, like a dose of conjunctivitis, But needless to say, menopause was never mentioned during the sex talk, nor the day in biology when we studied the female reproductive system. And it was a fascinating class. I still remember it. Our biology teacher told us all about the fact that as a girl baby, you're born with all of the eggs you're ever going to have inside your teeny tiny ovaries. And then she talked about the precarious journey that one egg makes every month down your fallopian tubes. But in all of that discussion, she never talked about what would happen when the eggs ran out. And menopause, again, and I was in an all-girls school, was never mentioned. Nor did I get a look in during the next sex talk I was subjected to, which was in second year. And my big take home from that was that it was mostly about periods. And I felt really bad because I didn't have my period yet. And I felt like I was really, I was bad at puberty. I was getting a D- in puberty, Ciara must try harder. So that's really all I remembered from that talk. But the third and final sex talk that I endured as a teenager was, again, in secondary school. We were in fourth year, and none other than Father Michael Cleary came into our school and got up on the stage in the hall and chain smoked his way through the most intense and extensive sex talk I've ever had, and he seemed to know a lot about it. You might remember, obviously, I think you do, that Father Michael Cleary was the kind of all-singing, all-dancing priest who also happened to father 2 sons back in the 60s and 70s. But again, even though his entire audience, there were hundreds of us, were female, menopause was never mentioned. So, as an Irish child of the 70s, I might be forgiven for growing up without having the remotest idea about menopause, and that is, for the most part, is what I actually did. So I did go on to eventually get my period, and then I got pregnant. I produced 3 human beings, all of which entered the world through my vagina. I managed to hold down a job, I paid a mortgage, and I sat on my kids whenever the infighting became too intense. And in all of that time, honestly, right up until I was about 47, I never thought about menopause. I never talked about it, me and my friends. It was never a subject that we discussed. I never saw menopausal women on the television, in the cinema, on the radio, and I never read about them in the pages of the novels that I consumed. When we don't talk about things, when we hide subjects away at the back of the wardrobe, like that, skirt that you bought only because it was 50% off and not because you really liked it, what happens then is that we shroud these subjects with shame and with stigma. And that is exactly what happened with menopause. So I arrived at the door of age 47, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. But this time, when I knocked, the door sort of creaked open, and inside it was all sort of, dark and cold, and it smelled like J-clots that should have been thrown in the bin 2 days before. Things were unfamiliar. So the first thing that happened to me was insomnia. Now, up until then, I could sleep, if I was let, like a teenager, which is to say all day long. The insomnia woke me up at 3 o'clock every morning, like on the button. This was accompanied by palpitations in my chest, which again, I'd never had before. I thought I was dying. I woke my husband up and I told him, I am dying. The first few times he did take it seriously, but after a few nights of this, he just mumbled, you're grand, and then he turned over and went back to sleep. It turns out that at 3 o'clock in the morning, people are not that susceptible to a sob story. Eventually, I did go to the doctor. Again, menopause was never mentioned. It never occurred to me that I might be menopausal or perimenopausal. I was still getting my periods regularly, but the doctor, who was a trained, experienced health professional, also never mentioned menopause or perimenopause. Instead, I was diagnosed with anxiety, and I was told to go and get some therapy and come back if that didn't work, and they give me some pills. Then the next thing that happened was that my libido went crazy. Like I'd be shockingly aroused at inappropriate times, like queuing in the post office for like bubble wrap and stamps. And then other times I only agreed to have sex with my husband because I felt sorry for him and his blue balls. The sex could be painful because my vagina was as dry as sandpaper. Everything else was dry too, my skin, my hair, my eyes, my scalp. Then I read something about perimenopause and I asked my mother about it. She said she'd never heard of it. In her day, women just went through the menopause until it was over. They didn't talk about it, they just got on with it. Women, and then I asked her, well, what do you think about HRT? Oh my God, that went down like a lead balloon. Women who were on HRT, they were vain, and they were trying to stay young, and also they were exposing themselves to the risk of breast cancer. And under no circumstances was I allowed to take it. My mother's menopause symptoms included vertigo so severe that she had to give up her job, which she did, uncomplainingly. That was just the price you paid, she said, when you were a woman. Nowadays, I'm glad to say that things are different. We have patches and gels, we have podcasts, we have discussion panels, we have fantastic events like this. Things are definitely better. But I am not for 1 minute suggesting that things are brilliant. There is no doubt that our healthcare system is riddled with ageism and sexism. There is still a shocking disparity between men and women's healthcare. A GP told me that of the 7 years they had spent studying medicine, menopause was touched on during one lecture on a rainy Tuesday evening in November that unhappily coincided with a beer and burritos special in the student bar, so it was very, very poorly attended. The old adage still exists that men become distinguished while us women diminish. All we have to do is look at the ads on the telly. A handsome man with luxury hair and a dangerous smile. He dances around a stylish house and flirts with a hot, sexy woman while fabulous music plays in the background. What is this ad for? It's for erectile dysfunction. The bottom line is, don't worry, your pretty little heads, we can rebuild you. Now, meanwhile, later on the same channel, a woman about the same age is delighted to tell you all about the pads she uses for her leaky bladder. They're super absorbent and really discreet, so no one will know you've had a little accident. Our bladders should not be leaking. Why are the medical professionals not doing something about this instead of sticking a pad in our knickers and telling us to be grateful? So yeah, we still have a way to go. But we have come a long way too, like events like these. 6 years ago, when perimenopause first took a bite out of me, there was a nothing like this. Now we have information. We have menopause clinics, we have better informed GPs, we have World Menopause Days and World Menopause Months, in fact. Information is power. It empowers us to ask for more information, to demand better services and better healthcare, to insist on improved facilities in the workplace, more understanding of this condition that affects 50% of the population and what it means for us. And what does it mean? On the downside, it means that yes, I am getting older. But let's not dismiss the positive bits of menopause. And yes, there are positive bits. For example, we can no longer get pregnant. We are free to have sex with every Tom, Dick and Harriet that we meet and fancy. And we no longer have to worry about impregnation. I mean, do still insist on condoms, obviously, because, STIs. But no more worrying about if and when your next period is going to come. And also, no more periods, which means no more PMS, which means no more cramps, and no more bloodstains on the gusset of your favourite white jeans. There is freedom in that. There's also freedom in having a lot less fucks to give, thanks to the reduction in our estrogen levels. We can be exactly who we are, and damn the begrudgers. And when I say the begrudgers, I mean the patriarchy. We will no longer tolerate being viewed through that most sexist of lens, the male gaze. We will make our presence felt as competent, resourceful, strong human beings, and we will refuse to be defined by the date of our last period. We're not going to go gently into the next phase of our lives. We're going to go loudly and proudly and wildly. Thank you. Louise said it was okay if I read you a bit of my book that I have written. This is the book that features a menopausal woman writer. Her name is Agatha Doyle. And she's having a bad time. She's menopausal, obviously I've said that, but she's got writer's block and lots of things are happening in her personal life. So she gets invited to this literary festival to speak on a panel, and she ends up having an absolute rant which goes viral. And so she unwittingly becomes the pin-up girl for menopausal women everywhere. So the bit I'm going to read you is at the festival. Agatha is sitting on a little stage with two other writers. One she calls GBH. His name is like Gerard Benjamin, let's call him Hart. I wrote this book quite a long time ago. So she calls him GBH, and the other is Ray Black. So she's in the middle of these two guys. 3:15 p.m. Event finally kicked off. I cannot understand why events on programs scheduled to begin at 3 p.m. invariably begin at 3:15 p.m. Why not just write 3:15 p.m. on the program? But then it would commence at 3:30 p.m. It is infuriating, especially when you're sandwiched on a couch between two man-spreaders, one of whom sort of fancies you in a big woman fetish kind of way, and the other is doing his best to make me like him again. 3:35 p.m. GBH reads from his latest opus, another one featuring Henry VIII. Men are fascinated by Henry. I suppose it's something to do with his transitory relationship with women and how he gets away with everything. A simple, off with her head when the going gets tedious. 3:55 p.m. It was hot in the room, the afternoon sun beating against the windows, not one of which was open. I could feel sweat pooling in the cups of my bra. I leaned against the back of the couch. If it weren't for my ruined feet, I might have dozed off. I dug my fingernails into the fleshy part of my hand in an effort to rouse myself, but I'd been biting my nails recently and it was a pathetic effort. 4:10 p.m. Clapping, everyone looking at me. I stood up and got myself to the podium somehow, as if my feet were perfectly ordinary feet in sensible, well-fitting shoes with things like cushion soles and maybe a fragrant insole. 4:20 p.m. I got through the reading. Of course I did. I'm an old pro. I've done this dozens of times, hundreds. 4:21 p.m. Finally, Buzzcut, she's the person, like the Louise person. Finally, Buzzcut opened the discussion to the floor, which meant the end was nigh. Most of the questions were directed at GBH and Ray Black. GBH began all his responses with, "Great question," as if he's never been asked where he gets his ideas from. Fuck's sake. I was finally asked a question and it was about writer's block, and I said there's no such thing. It's just common or garden laziness, and the best way to get over it is to write your way through it. The audience, mostly aspiring writers at these events, seethed with a collective resentment. 4:35 p.m. Buzzcut scans the room. There are a few hands up. She took her time, then picked a bearded man wearing literary glasses, which is to say Joycean ones, a tweed suit and a beret tilted at what he probably felt was a rakish angle. 4:40 p.m. 5 minutes it took him to deliver his monologue, which boiled down to this. The only reason I've never been published is because there is a bias against cis, white, middle-class men in the publishing industry. Discuss. Or no, not discuss, but I'm right, haven't I? I opened my mouth to respond when he cut in with a public schoolboy polite, "Oh no, sorry, I'm actually directing that question to Ray or George." Before he added his adorable little caveat, I was just ordinary angry. Afterwards, I was menopausal angry. I forgot about my bloodied stumps and leaped to my feet, emitting a guttural roar. I wrestled my feet out of the shoes. Me, does it matter which one? Beardy man. Sorry? Ray or George? Beardy man. Well, no, so just somebody with a dick then. I emphasized the word dick in case he didn't realize I was angry. That's beardy man. Buzzcut. I think that's all we have time for. We're way over. She walked up the side of the room trying to make eye contact with me. No fucking chance. Me. Do you know how many writers are cis, white and middle class? Beardy man. No, me. The majority of them. And here's a shocker. The women in that group earn 25% less than the men. So for every worthy tome a man pens, a woman has to write a book and a quarter to earn the same amount. Then she has to withstand the ire of mainstream reviewers who will dismiss her efforts as fluff and chicklet and domestic. What say you to that? Beardy man. I'm unfamiliar with the exact Well, luckily for you, I'm not. Let's see. Do you know what percentage of writers are Middle Eastern? Me, 1%. Do you know what percentage are queer? Beardy man. Are you supposed to say queer anymore? Random woman in audience. Yes, queer is fine. Beardy man. Oh, me. Do you know what percentage are refugees, migrants, working class, travellers? My anger scorched the inside of my head and seemed to have frightened my brain fog away. The statistics kept coming. Beardy man, holding his hands in a I surrender pose. Look, I think me. And to go back to underpaid women writers, do you know how many of us have gone, are going, or will go through the menopause? Beardy man. Well, I don't see what that's got to do with me. All of them. And do you know how many of those will talk about it, will let you know the challenges it presents and the impact it has on their work? Beardy man. Me. None of them. Well, actually, no, that's not true. One of them. And that is me. I am a menopausal woman standing here before you all in a lather of sweat, terrified that I might forget a word in the middle of a sentence with the threat of brain fog that looms over me on a daily basis as I sit at my desk and attempt to write to a deadline. I have insomnia, none of my clothes fit me, and there is a chance I'm more irritable than I used to be. I took the opportunity to collect myself. I was breathing like I'd run up several flights of stairs. It felt like there were broken bits of me lying around the room. When I spoke again, my throat felt dry and my voice sounded hoarse. I looked at the beardy man. What was your question again?